our new podcast, its origins, and how to snag CEs right off of social media, all on this episode of the EM Unplugged podcast. Let's go get it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the EM Unplugged podcast. This is going to be our introductory podcast. I'm probably going to call it episode 0. I thought that was cool. But anyway, I'm Charlie Swearingen. I am a flight paramedic of about almost 20 years. I've been a paramedic. I got my 20-year certificate from registry here a couple months ago. I live in Mississippi, but I've traveled all over. I've run a couple different education companies and own one. And so when I met Greg, who is Shade Tree Cardiology, there was an immediate connection, and we started a new company, and I just wanted to introduce myself and then, of course, get you guys aware of us and what we're doing and our efforts. So with that, Greg, tell us a little bit about yourself.
If you don't know me, my name is Gregory Carr.
They probably know you.
They probably do, yeah. That's which says terrible things about your character if you're listening to this, by the way. But no, so my name is Greg. I was an Army medic for 8 years. I joined shortly after we went to war in the Middle East. I can tell you guys more about that whole thing later and why as soon as I figure it out. But I have loved this since I got into it. I initially, during training, fell in love with the science, the problem solving, and then I don't know what you would call it, Charlie, the overall goal of bringing care and aid to the sick and injured. And I've used that line for 20 years. I started in 2003. I've stuck with that meaning and mantra, that and to ease suffering. I decided while I was in Iraq that I was going to do all kinds of wild things. I got to do a lot of things individually and autonomously because I would go places that we would never send a doctor. So in the military, the more expendable you are, the more chance you have of learning more, and they will train you. And they did. And after that, I came into EMS. I was going to go be a doctor. I was 100% sure of that. So I started working on undergrad, and I just became a paramedic because that kept me in the game. And right. That was going to let me have a good job with benefits while I was going to be a student. I had no idea that I would love this so much. And to put that in context, I was only in the Army 8 years. So here we are, year 20 and some change. And I love it. And that's me. And after I was a teacher in the service, I taught Iraqi medics and still speak a good amount of Arabic. Although if anybody asks me, I do this. I have this little joke I tell people where I say no. I can't say a single word of Arabic, but I say that in Arabic. So those
dude speaks about like, 6 languages or something, maybe even more. So that's pretty impressive, dude.
It's fun to communicate with people, and it gets very addictive when someone is in distress. They're in a terrible situation. Here you are, the medical person. Everything is terrible, and you can communicate with them in their native language. And right. Verse said wishes it could calm people like I do when that happens. So
that was going to be the next t-shirt.
Nice. And that's not a statement of ego. It's a statement of how wonderful is it that I can communicate with someone in such a way that they feel better.
Right. Powerful to be able to. Right. And I've only just now learning Spanish. My wife speaks Spanish, and I know you do too. So maybe that'll be the first thing we learn. We want to teach our daughter as we go through.
Well, I started with Bella almost immediately, and
awesome.
You will not regret it. I can have conversations with my daughter when we're scheming or we're planning a surprise party for my wife or getting her a present. So she is my partner in crime. You and your daughter are going to be the same way. You will not regret learning a language. For anybody listening, you will not regret it.
So yeah, and we're going to have to learn it too because Marge already speaks Spanish pretty well. So we're going to have to learn something else.
So Marge and I are going to be scheming against everybody, me and Marge and Isabella and Isla. So you're going to have to learn.
You're going to have to learn. Speed. So, and that kind of, let's talk about that for a second. The whole learning thing, that's what got us into talking about working together and then what can we do. And you can't just do it. You can't, because we all have jobs and responsibilities, and you have to figure out a way to make it feasible. And I think that you and I got along real well because we don't want to charge people like ridiculous amounts of money. We want we want to give you a good product, and we want to be able to charge something reasonable. And I think that's when we first started talking, it's like, oh, okay. And then we started talking a little bit more, and we'll get deep into a little bit of that later, but I did want to talk about what the heck EM Unplugged is. Yep. And our goal we were coming up with names, of course, emergency medicine for the EM. That makes sense. And then Unplugged, my wife gets credit for this. We were talking about, had the EM radio and EM this and EM that. And then there was a picture that popped up, and it was a TikTok of you like playing guitar. And she pointed on the wall. She goes, you play guitar? And I'm like, I make the strings move. Like, he actually plays. But her point was like, why don't you EM Unplugged? And she's very musically inclined, and it natural intuition that I was like, all of a sudden I thought through, my mind went through, it was like, all right, Unplugged, what does that mean? It means to get rid of all the complexity, to make something very simple and very focused. And I was like, that's it, that's us. Because I think that you do such a great job of explaining things on a complex time. I mean, you blow people's hair back because you explain things on a simple level, but you do it layer, and like you're 8 layers deep of simplicity, which, I mean, anytime you add 8 layers, it becomes complex. And so it's beautiful the way that you can do that. And I've always tried to do, when I teach, I try to say, this is 3 a.m. redneck medicine. This is what you need to be able to use at 3 a.m. when you're got the pediatric code happening, or, you have to do a procedure on an awake pediatric. All right, let's go to work. Let's make sure we fall back to our training. And then, of course, and I got some new swag.
I dig it. Mine's on the way. Right? I cannot wait.
And we came up with, we quickly realized that EM Unplugged, and we know we like what that means and what that stands for, but then all of a sudden it was EMU is beautiful. So that's us, man. That's how we got started. What were your thoughts like, or what was your first memory of us actually like talking about doing this podcast specifically?
You came recommended to me highly by a couple of people, and no one more highly than Jenna. Jenna spoke really highly of you.
Love Miss Roxbury.
I do. And you have to understand that I am not a major player in the educational scene. I'm just me. I'm me, and I'm there, and I go do things. And I just want to share the craft. So no words for political stuff. So I get, I don't know how many messages. I get a lot. And usually I answer every single one of them, but very few of them engage me like dynamically, where I know I'm talking to somebody awesome. And I remember talking to you, and I remember there's an EMS talk like group text, and I remember asking, who's Charlie? Everybody's speaking really highly of Charlie. And then of course, you had glowing recommendations, and then we started to communicate directly. And I remember thinking, man, I like this guy. And I forget who made the offer, if it was me or you, to say, hey, let me buy you a beer, let's grab some dinner. And I decided to come up and see you. And within no time flat, Miss Marge was there just talking to you guys. I was like, there's something here. I really like this guy. And I do not hand out cool points early in the game very often, but I'm a very good judge of character just through an amalgamation of things that have happened in my life, right? So just, of course, you got your traumas, you got your training and dealing with stuff and interrogation and all that. And you can tell when people are really open and they're just expressing their ideals to you, and you can tell what their motivations are. And so I liked you pretty much instantly. And that was when I said, all right, I'm going to pitch my dream to Charlie. You remember this? We got some good bourbon, and I'm going to pitch my dream to Charlie. I was like, here it is. So,
send it.
Yeah. And so you listened intently. And everything you said was a perfect add-on that I had not yet considered. And I was like, all right, this is the yin to my yang. And I don't know if it was me or you who said, hey, let's just go for it and just see where it goes. What could possibly go wrong? Like, I remember saying that. And The next thing I know, we have a company, which I attribute to you. You are so smart at navigating all these avenues to make it legal and make it where we can give people continuing education for what we do anyway. And that was just the coolest thing that's happened to me in a very long time. It's right up there with getting married. You know what I mean? That's one of the coolest things, because I finally found somebody who shared the dream and said, look, man, I want to make a living. I don't want to make a killing, but I don't want to quote unquote start a company for the sake of starting a company. Like, I want to do something awesome, and then I want to make it affordable, because I know what we make on the ambulance, and I want to make it where everybody else has access to this, not just trying to sell massive packages to EMS agencies and bidding wars and all that quality,
right?
And we're in it.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of good kind words there. I think that the same thing as far as going out on a limb, like, we didn't know each other. And then I remember I remember sending something like, hey, if I can drive down to NOLA, blah blah blah, and then we started talking about, no, I can just drive up. If you want to drive up and save me 3 hours, I'll take it. And my wife was like, do you even know this guy? And I was like, I get it, but I know people in EMS, and so I'm going to take a chance, and we're going to meet him, and if he's full of shit or if he's a kook, then fine. But it was like you said, cylinders started to hit. We started at that great brewery, and then we moved to that dinner where you started we started telling me all your dreams, and what I was seeing was, okay, I've been in a lab for 4 years building this new system. I don't advertise it. And let's be honest, I've learned a lot of ways to fail at this. I don't spell so GUD. Grammar is also left me as well. And then because I'm a one-man show and I don't really advertise, I don't have any customer service. So any customer service issue has always exploded. And so as I approached you, I knew that I needed to make sure that I was very vocal about, all right, this is where it's great that you like some of the things that I do, but here's where I'm also really weak. And we'll just hire people, or we'll do something. We'll make sure that we're hitting these, fixing these. Now, that said, as you were telling me the things that you want to do, and I was like, we could have this whole friggin' ecosystem of stuff that's different. And then this is different from the EMS talk and some of the conferences that people like want us all to get together. And I hope that some of that happens. But for this effort, I thought, damn, this ecosystem, like we could have, a website that has everything on it, books, merch, courses, live lectures, all that. Then we could have the LMS so that people can actually take content. And we're going to talk about that in a second, how we're going to be really different than everybody else in that capacity. And then there's going to be people that really want to hang out with us a little bit more and want to gain whatever they want from us. They're so supporters. And so we're building this. And I had all this vision at the time. I didn't know exactly how I was going to package it, but everything you were saying, I was just like taking put that in this box, take this in this box, and I'll put this in this box. And then over, I don't know, the last month or so, a couple months, it has just begin to explode into EM Unplugged, where we have the name, we have the information, the reasoning behind it, our plan, our vision. We even have what we jokingly call our Class A and Class B logos. So the circular logo with the red EM Unplugged, that's our Class Bs. But if you want to get fancy, we get the EMU, because EMU, the acronym of our podcast.
I love it.
So and one of the biggest things was you were laying out all this stuff, and I was like, yeah, I want to do all this. I have this whole new system of providing choose your own adventure style education, and I have a couple other ways that I've been building things. For instance, if you're trying to get a recertification, either right now you go and you do the lecture and quiz model, and that's basically all there is. Or you could do a real in class, which is also a lecture and typically quiz, and you get your CE model. Now, I want to change that. I want to have 4 or 5 different ways, and that's what I built. And showing you that, like maybe I think it was the next trip you came down, and one night you stayed the night, and then I showed you all this stuff, and you're like, "What the hell, man? Why isn't this?"
Was
and
so
I'm like,
great.
"I'm not ready to. I needed somebody. I needed something, and you're the catalyst. You're my catalyst, Greg." And,
well, I think the big
that
thing was it works great because, and I jokingly tell my wife, I'm looking away to fund my emergency medicine habit. It's the love of the game. And we call it the game jokingly. It's not really a game at all, is it? It's the highest of stakes that has to be handled with grace and a calm demeanor. And I needed somebody else who looked at it that way. And I'm not saying I haven't met anybody like that, but there's so many dynamics. It's two completely incredibly intricate 8-dimensional puzzle pieces, and every piece has to fit, right? Because it's not just, oh, we both have a passion for this. It's we have a passion, we can get along, we both work really hard, we're both willing to lose sleep writing a book with you on an oil rig where 14-hour days are my minimum, and still having to make that time to work out and work over. And there's stuff that happens where you're working 16 hours a day and still cranking out a chapter or reviewing a chapter or editing. I needed somebody that can match my energy on that, because and honestly, I feel like you leave me behind in how hard you work, which is making me step my game up. I needed that in a partner. And it doesn't necessarily matter that we talked earlier, I wish you lived closer, but it didn't matter to me how far they lived away from me, especially in this day and age that everything is so digital, even with the education. So I know a good person when I meet one, and I know a good match when I see one. And I know that you are not a person that's going to ever look at me and say, that's not going to be so easy. I think in ECG Hero, when it was like, we want to write something and target it towards both the student and the critical care professional all at the same time, and the street medic all at the same time, And I want to say, and I may be flubbing it a little bit, it's not a quote, but I want to say you said, "That's impossible. Let's do it." I like that. Oh, that's what I need, man. I need somebody who will never look at me and say, "We've always done it this way."
Oh, yeah.
The most toxic words that have ever been uttered in medicine. We've always done it this way. Or
Right.
if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Hey, get out
Here
of
we
here
go.
with that,
Yep.
man. Yeah, get out of here with that.
Yeah. No, that's, dude. And I got to credit my mom and dad as a disabled person, which we could argue if it's disabled or not. I'm born with no ankles and stand on prosthetics. I usually say stilts, but they never gave me any quarter. Go put your legs on and go take the damn trash out. Yes. We've told you twice. It's okay. Yes, ma'am. And that's been there was never like impossibility or no, or you can't. That was, matter of fact, can't was like a dare. That's okay. Oh, so you don't think I can make the baseball team? Oh, okay. All right. And I played in high school. I got up to college. My apex kind of started to dwindle, but I played and realized pretty quickly that, oh, now I got to do other stuff. And then that transition, all right, now let's go find something else impossible to tackle. And so I definitely credit my mom and appreciate those kind words. And I think that the beginning of that story is a great segue into ECG Hero. And again, it also mirrors a little bit of our origin background. Mm-hmm. I was about a little over halfway through ECG Hero, but on a momentum. I was pushing it, and I was ready to get this done. And I had no idea that if I'd have done that alone, it would not have been anything what it is now. And when we talk to our wives about, I know this guy's a stranger, but now like we've achieved something. I showed you and asked you like, hey, I really could use your help. You're so friggin' smart on this stuff. Your moniker is cardiology, and the way that you talk about it is such a high level, but again, you keep it simple. I have no idea how you learned all that stuff because it's good stuff. And you said yes, and you came in there and you reviewed all the chapters and you added stuff in there, and it was easy to get you as that co-author and man together as a tribute to, we said a lot of kind words to each other now, and let's give people like a little bit of background into me and you, and of course more as we do more of these, there'll be less ass kissing, so to speak, and more of you and I like taking on the world. But people need to know a little bit of why the hell we're together. And then all of a sudden, we got done with it, we sent it off, we went to NOLA, and we brought 50 books, and you passed out most of them. I passed out maybe 10, but then I went off on vacation, and while we were on vacation, I saw this little bit of a email, and I'm like, that has to be wrong. It has to be like part of an advertisement. Clickbait. All right, you got me. Click. Because I thought it said something about bestseller, and I pull it up, and it says #1 bestseller. This is within a few weeks, and here we are. And talk about your thoughts, ECG Hero, from like your perspective and how it's, what you think, how you think it's impacted me and you, and of course, EM Unplugged.
I think, yeah, you have to give it a little bit of the origin of it. So like you, I was born with a defiant spirit. The most motivating words I've ever been told are, you can't do that. So, well, I'll just be damned. I will break my neck to make that happen. And I don't come from erudite people or anything
Sweet
like
word.
that.
I'll put that on the screen later.
Yeah. So I don't come from erudite people or people that had massive amounts of education or anything like that, any college or anything like that. But where there's a will, there's a way. It is the trite verbiage people like to throw on it. But if you really want to do something, you can figure it out. And because of that, I believe anybody can learn anything. And that is how I learned a lot. I read a ton of books, and that's the thing that gets people is information synthesis. So you have to retain it, and then you have to break it down and turn it into something usable, much like a cell does with protein, right? In the endoplasmic reticulum, for fun medical facts. And a lot of that synthesis of information, or that synthesis of protein, things are broken down to their most basic levels, and then they are reassembled in a way that the body or the cell finds useful. And I have always felt like information is that way ever since I learned about those things. So breaking things to their most simple points has always been what I've done, which is why it's called shade tree cardiology, because my grandfather was an uneducated mechanic, and I don't mean that as a pejorative. He had a 4th or 5th grade education, but he started as a shade tree, quote unquote, mechanic, and he finished his career as a professional mechanic with a government job he did okay. So I thought, there's no reason I can't do that. There's no thing that says you can't learn the information. But then when you go to consume the information, You buy one book and you very quickly find out you have to buy 5 other books to understand the one book. And so with ECG Hero, that was an opportunity when you presented that to me, that I could try to put some of my riz on this, where I could say, you know what, I think we can trim cardiology down to its most basic concepts and still have it be fantastic information. And then we could put conclusions at the end of the chapter that had maybe the more complicated things that you only ever interact with after you've laid a great foundation of very fundamental concepts. Because whether you are a brilliant person who's well spoken or whatever, in your brain you recognize patterns, and your brain will break things down to their most simple patterns. And if you're not careful, it'll do it all the way to the point that the information becomes wrong. So we had to guard against that. But it was an opportunity to writing ECG Hero was an opportunity to work with someone that said, all right, let's go as far as we can and make this consumable, interesting, and simple. And let's not try to show off how smart we are. Let's try to make other people come up to our level, right? Which I feel like is the mission of EM Unplugged. And I think that because it started so organically that way, it's gonna do well. I can tell you that in a world of fake plastic smiles, people crave genuine interactions. And that was another reason I wanted to work with you to begin with. You did not try to impress me with how smart you were. You tried to have a real human interaction with me. And as much as it can be done through that book, I think that's what we were trying to do, is have a real human interaction with people and say, look, you can do this. It can be done. Here's as simple as it can be broken down, in our opinion. But we feel like this is to the point that anybody who picks up a copy of this is not going to be one of the 50% that fails out of paramedic school. And also, because our brains, going back to the point from before, because our brains break things down to simple points, this is good for the practitioner who's been in the game a while, because you have to review these things. You have to remember these things. And you don't always have time to go through a 2,000-page copy of Tintinelli's Emergency Medicine. I love Judith Tintinelli. I love that book, but you don't always have time to read that whole thing. So here is a sub 300-page volume with the most important things with which you will ever interact, and some new information you probably don't know. And that was really the opportunity that ECG Hero presented. And that was why that was the motivation that could let me crank out a 16-hour day in the middle of the ocean and still go chisel an hour or an hour and a half out to work on that book afterward, because I knew there was going to be nothing else like this. And whether it failed or whether it did great, at least I got to be a part of something that I had always wanted to see happen. And obviously the reception was amazing.
We're still writing it. What I haven't told you,
I love it.
What I haven't told you is we're working on 14 different school contracts right now. And
yes.
So that they're adopting our book. We have one for sure. That's Oklahoma State University in Oklahoma City. And there's 2 or 3 here in Mississippi that have given me soft verbals. And then there's a bunch that I've had to like pause everything and build basically the communication and the pathways so that can happen. That's a good problem to have. But so that's all exciting. And so the success right now, or rather the reception, that was a better word, because I don't mean to be pompous at all. The reception is awesome. And so and I think one of the differences was the goal of this book was to not only do, because it's got the majority, if not all, of the lead 2 rhythms, but the main part of the book, it's a 12 lead approach. And it's the full title of the book, of course, for those who haven't seen it yet, is ECG Hero, the ABCs of ECG. And this was born, my partner in critical care skills competitions, Robert the Man Hector, and I'll tell that story here in a little bit. You and I becoming friends as fast as we did was exactly what happened with he and I, and we will have him probably on the show a bunch if you'll let me, but I guarantee you he'll win you over too. But the point here is we were in a competition, and you're mic'd up. We're at AMTC. There's a couple hundred people watching us, and when I say watching, judging. There's hundreds of people judging the crap out of what you're doing. But that's one reason why we like to do it, because what that does is if you mess up there, you're like, okay, I should have done this and this. And don't worry, I will never mess that up again. Not only in competition, but in real calls and flights. So
that's real pressure.
That's real pressure. And anyway, at the beginning of this, they give you the background scenario, and then sometimes they hand you some information, and then you have 2 minutes on the way to discuss what your plan is. They handed me a 12 lead, and so I'm kneeling down and I'm prepping I think I was prepping an infusion already because we knew a little bit of what we thought was going on. I looked up and they handed it to me and I said, okay, there's no axis, there's no blocks. I don't see pericarditis. There's no drug effects that I see. There's no real funny or odd waves. The electrolytes look good. There's no hypertrophy. I don't see any infarction. I don't see anything else. Okay. And then I hand it off. And then later that judge comes up to me and says, how in the hell did you do that? And I was like, because I know ABCs. A for axis, B for block, C for pericarditis. That's a bit of a stretch, but it works. D for drug effects, E for electrolytes, E, F, G for general, or F for funny waves, like anything weird, like your sine waves, your Osborne waves, so on. Then G for general, and that's where we put all the lead to make sure you know the basics, the underlying, and the generally, how do you approach your patient? Don't look at just the monitor, look at your patient. H was hypertrophy, and I, lastly, is infarction, because too often that's the first thing we look at, and I tell people, look for that last. Pericarditis should be anything if you're looking at SC segment elevation, rule that out, and then go through all the other stuff, and before you get to the eye. And then once I remember the day that I was explaining this, my approach, you were like, damn. And so I think that in the end, like, it's an easy way. Like we've talked about, trying to make it easy and approachable is an easy way to get people to understand how to use that. And I hope that it really does. But hopefully getting into other schools, that will be the case.
Everybody who reads that book and memorizes the information is going to pass cardiology. I'll guarantee you that. That's the thing. What you simplify is how to get it in your brain. But once it's there, they're like engine parts. You just have to ship them into the cortex. But once you put them together, they will work together flawlessly if they are assembled correctly. And I've got a story like that. I was this brand new guy working a part-time job in 2015. Fun little agency. That year I treated more shootings than I treated in my last year in Iraq, if that tells you anything. So very
sounds like
busy.
Jackson, Mississippi too.
It's a blast. Did a lot of good work and helped a lot of people. But the training officer was arguing with some field personnel about the diagnosis on an EKG, and they had gone through and they had gotten the ER doctor involved and just trying to figure out kind of everything about what had happened here. And they pull it up and they said, what do you think about this? Because I'm the new guy, right? They want to make sure they're imbuing these lessons to the new people. And I looked at it probably 20 seconds. I said, oh man, that's an isolated posterior wall in my, you almost never see those. And you could almost hear the jaw hit the desk. You know what I mean?
Right.
How do you know that? But it's right there. You know what I mean? It's right there in front of us.
Right.
So it's never been a question of if you're good or whatever. It's always been a question of, can we ship these parts into your cortex, and how do we do that? And that's the science of being a teacher, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I do explain things well, is analyze that relentlessly.
Yeah.
And I had a chance working with you to really add my contribution to that field to ECG Hero, to share the way I explain things and hopefully have a better shipping method. I don't want to be the USPS of shipping information to the cortex. I want to be FedEx, man. I want to get it in there quickly, accurately by 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Sweet.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good analogy. I love that. And I think overall, like, the approach isn't just, I've always akined like knowledge, like understanding that it's perishable. Right. Everything you cram in there can cram the heck out of there. And if you don't touch it, it does it faster. And so I usually, like those old circuses where there was a guy with 6 plates and he's like spinning a plate. And so then he spins another one. So he's got these 6 plates going. He's got to run back and forth because one starts to wobble and he's got to spin it to keep it going. That's our knowledge, especially as non-physicians, because you and I are not physicians yet. We have other stuff cooking, but we, as non-physicians, I tell people all the time, like, if you're a paramedic or a nurse or you're doing critical care transport, something where you're autonomous, like, you can learn everything that a physician can learn. But the fact that every decision that they make clinically in training, somebody's looking over their shoulder, busting their butt if they get something wrong, because they really just highlight the failure points so that you learn from them. And unfortunately, how many times have we gone on a run and we think we've done something great, and then we get a PCR with a little bit of red ink and, all right, whatever. But if that was like blown up in front of everybody and really hit hard, then we probably would do a little bit better. And plus just the number of evolutions that they see, like in a day versus we might see 12, they see 30 or 40. And so I've always respected physicians and always tried to know my role and be cognizant of that. At the same time, we are given that sliver of medicine, specifically emergency medicine, of which we could become near experts at. And that's where I really liked you, because you'll go all the way out to that edge of the pie. And the thought of what we can learn, what we can use, and that's for physicians. Anybody can learn this. And my physician behind me that has my medical control says, "Yep, if you can do that, then I allow it go." And so that's, of course, that's what med control is. But I think that's what I really appreciated you was like you're learning as much as possible without overstepping into some. There's always going to be debate other whether you should do this procedure that we're allowed to do, and that's fine. That could be what it is. But in the end, like learning your craft and getting good at it, and then keeping that knowledge. And so that's initial versus ongoing. I hate calling it refresher. It's semantics at that point, but we learn it, and we got to keep it. And that was something that it was important to you that you verbalized, and definitely important to me, and definitely something I appreciate.
That's one of the things. One of the major gaps between paramedic education and physician education is that there's a lot of people that try to keep paramedic at the technician level. And there's a culture built around that, right? Everybody wants to talk about scope of practice. What is one of the biggest advertisements people tell you whenever they try to get you to come to their county is they go, "We're an RSI county." Right. And that means nothing to me. I tell my students, paramedics are not paid for what they can do. They are paid for what they can recognize. And one of the big things about understanding how things work or understanding what to do, how to diagnose and how to treat is you have to understand the why behind the how, right? So why are you infusing fluid into the septic patient? Why, are you going to do X amount before you give a pressor, and why not more? So understanding those things, this is where it gets into quote unquote physician level knowledge, except it's not physician level knowledge. It's knowledge for everyone. And even if you can't prescribe HCTZ for someone's blood pressure, understanding the full context of that renal system and how it works in renal failure and how it works in end-stage renal disease over time, that helps you make the therapeutic decisions that you need to make that are appropriate for each individual patient, because this is not a checklist. It's not like Idiocracy where you just plug in your symptoms and it spits a thing out. That's why WebMD doesn't work. So why on earth would you approach your own education that way? And that's one of the big things that I've tried to do is, okay, let me take information that people usually don't get, right? Because it's too complicated, because you got to take a year of organic chemistry to understand how that works. And then let me break it down to the simplest possible terms that I can so we understand the why. And if we understand that why, these metabolic processes that work individually over time, and that's what continuing education was always supposed to be. It was not supposed to be rehashing old crap. Right. It was supposed to be adding on to your clinical expertise. And that's one of the things we're approaching it with full force, freight train speed. And that is why I am committed to it, because that is the other thing. When you absorb that why, when you understand everything that's going on inside the body, these multiple layers we're talking about, the what to do, the how to treat, it becomes incredibly simple, because you know exactly what's going on, exactly what should be going on chemically, what this pharmaceutical intervention or what you can do with this knife or this needle and what it's going to do. And it obviously becomes simple. So as strange as it sounds, the more complicated of a level you understand this on, the simpler the therapy becomes. And this is something that's like learning EKGs. It's like learning cardiology, that magic moment where people's brain gets it and they click. I see that happen to people when I'm talking and lecturing, or when we're having conversations like at conferences, and I see it click and I'm like, you get it now, don't you? It just happened just now in real time. I get to see that. Right. And that, honestly, if you say, Greg, what are you addicted to? I'm addicted to that.
Yeah, we should be able to put that like on an invoice. Okay, travel stipend, cost per person, and then feeling of jubilation from seeing people like something click. I do this thing that I want people to understand that everything we do is to facilitate oxygen and sugar getting into a cell and preventing acidosis. And I would argue that, I hate saying 100%, so I'll say 99.9%. That's what we're trying to do, which is why I tell the story, and I'm not going to rehash it here for time, but my story of the oxygen conjugal visit, and that all we're really doing is pimping out oxygen to sugar. And so basically everything we do in emergency medicine, we're oxygen pimps, baby. Hashtag oxygen pimps. That's actually trended not long ago. It was pretty badass. Really? So we got stickers, we got t-shirts. Check out the merch section. All right.
That's one of the things I loved about PHTLS is it took the time to say that shock is a state of inadequate energy production. And while some people are in the classroom throwing a fit about that, they don't like it. I am doing cartwheels in the back. That's what I'm talking about, man.
Yeah. Nerds unite,
because
right
that's
here.
where we want to be. That's
right.
where we want to be, man.
That's it. And
This is the physician minor leagues, and you know what? I am happy to be here.
That's funny,
I am
man.
happy
That's
to
solid.
be a functional part of the system. I do want to be a doctor eventually. I don't want to impersonate one right now. I'm a medic, and being a medic is freaking awesome. I just want to be a really good one.
And I need a beer to toast that. So I got.
I know. Yeah. Cheers, bro. We'll get one after this.
We'll get one after this. I like that. All right, then that does get into a little bit of the things that we talked about wanting to. You specifically mentioned ongoing refresher education was never meant to be just the same lecture we had 2 years ago or 4 years ago or however long, which is why when you and I sat down, and this was like a moment where this might have been that first dinner, and it was just like, oh, okay, we're already doing TikToks, and there's all these great content people out there doing TikToks or social media where it's an education base, and people just eat and consume that up. What if we can harness some CEs with it? And then so that's one of the things that we're offering is that we will have some of these episodes of the podcast that will have a series on, or a playlist specifically on podcast CEs. We'll call them PCEs, where we will either I'll review one of Greg's TikToks, or we'll review somebody else's together, or some version. And then at the end, like the podcast will be free, just like this one. However, if you want CEs for it, for any of the PCEs, you'll click the link in the description. You show up in one of our parts of our trifecta ecosystem, the learning management system, which is our online classroom. And kablam, you don't have to rewatch the video. You've already seen it. But if you watch the one where it's us, or rather, once you're good, you've clicked go, then you go right to 10 questions. And the cool thing about the questions, sorry, I didn't mean to make this a commercial, but I want to hype up people, and I want to ask your opinion about it right after this, is the design was to have video questions where it's me talking. That's where we live. We live in social media. We don't want to read. We don't want a wall of letters to look at. We want, all right, tell me. So it's me or you or a guest that's basically asking questions, and then you choose the answers on the bottom. If you get them right, you go to the next question. You get them wrong, and we take you out of that main learning line, and then you get a mini lecture, 3 to 5 minutes, on that content you just missed. So if you missed 2 out of 10 questions, you just got a tailored series of refresher based on what your current weakness, which is what we all should be finding, is what's our weakness right now, because we all have those 6 plates running, and they will fall if you don't keep spinning them. And so that's the whole point. And the day I think the most happy I was relative to you being excited about what we can do is when I showed you those elements, and the fact that we're pairing it with podcasts and social media. It's how we learn now. We've taken these micro moments and we're turning it into an hour CE, backed by ASNA, California Nursing Board, CAPSI, and soon via CAPSI in our EMT. We're going to actually be giving stuff that's real, that's not just old crap.
And that's one of the things, and we talked about that in the very beginning when I think we talked about it at the brewery, and then I know we talked about it at dinner with you and Marge, and I said, I get all these comments. I wish I could get CEs for watching this video. I'm just throwing this information out there because I know there's people that want to know it. So I had people to say, I wish I could get CEs. And that was what I pitched to you. I said, what if you could? Is there a way we can make this happen? And the reason I enjoyed that model was people came to see the content voluntarily. So it keeps you honest, right? It keeps you working hard to make dynamic and engaging content, because you can only seek a CEU after the fact, right? So it has to be dynamic and engaging. And then the best part about it is, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I notice the way the world works around me, right? And we're all ran by algorithms. And in this particular context, we are leveraging the algorithm to your weaknesses, like you said. So if you're searching a bunch of videos on sepsis and you don't know who I am, and you don't know who Charlie is, and I pop up on your feed because you're looking for sepsis, we are leveraging your emergency medicine weakness to your benefit with, and I'm just going to come out and say it, some of the best content that is available, because to date, for Shade Tree Cardiology's ran since 2016, and we haven't handed out CEUs up until EM Unplugged, and people came and watched it voluntarily. A lot of the people who watch my stuff are physicians themselves, right? Because like you said before, information's perishable. You're not going to keep this if you're not using it. Using that method, you never stand a chance of turning into one of those CE companies that's mass marketed. That is your monthly one you have to complete on shift. That is boring that you click through. What did you call it the other day when we were talking?
One of our beta testers who, by the way, loved this setup, and I was really happy to hear all these beta testers. One of them said, "Click and sleep CEs."
Yeah. There's no danger of becoming that because we're removing our safety net, right? We are not going to enjoy the safety net of, oh, we are specifically a CEU company. We can just get into bidding wars with other companies and see how it works. And we're not going to do that. We're going to make awesome stuff that draws people anyway. And then at the end of the video, you say, by the way, you can get a CEU for what you just watched. And then as we moved into the business side, which you now know I'm not really good at, I have these ideas, I have these ideals, managing it at a price point where it was affordable for what you make on the truck. And I don't mean affordable as in, if you don't eat meat this month, you can get EM Unplugged. I meant it literally. I don't even like to tell people what I just paid to renew my stuff. Now, I went through a great website. I'm not going to use their name because it would almost sound like I was denigrating them in this context. I'm not. I went to them because they're great. But I don't want to charge that kind of money. When I do live lecture, and you've seen my invoices, like I don't charge a ton of money. I don't charge what some of the other guys charge because I know what people's budgets are. And it doesn't do me any good to be sitting on a Scrooge McDuck mountain of money in exchange for trading my dream. And my dream was educating people and bringing paramedics up to the highest level that they can possibly achieve. Because as long as you're the best you can be, 99% of the time, you're better than everybody else, just because everybody else isn't putting in that effort. Going into this venture with you, I could tell right off the bat, that guy is never going to ask me to trade. He's never going to ask me to trade because there's a dollar at the end of the stick. And that is how EM Unplugged, and because this is an origin story, I just wanted to bring up this point. That's what EM Unplugged was founded upon. And there's no danger of it ever becoming one of those cookie cutter things, because it wasn't built that way. It wasn't built from those materials. And I'm not trying to denigrate any other continuing education company per se, but this is one of those things, like when the preacher talks to the congregation, who you are, you know, and if the shoe fits, you know what I mean? But right. I don't want to be that guy, and I knew you didn't either. And just, it's really exciting to be doing this. So you say it in very eloquent business terms, and I say it in the pie in the sky dreamer terms, but they're the same thing.
Yeah.
Con Ed shouldn't suck, and I should get something out of it. I should walk out of every Con Ed session knowing something I had no clue about. I'm not just talking about one or two new facts. You should solve a mystery for me in Con Ed. You should answer something I've always wanted to know. You should have busted a myth, right? Don't give me what I already know because you got some paper on the other end of it. I already went through that one time. It was called college, right? I don't need that.
No, I love it, man. You just completed a clinical education miracle. That's the way you want people to feel, right, when they walk out. And you mentioned it earlier, and we've all seen that. You know, in every class, you have all the different types of there's stereotypical types of students. But the one that's, like we've already mentioned, that favorite is one that goes,
yeah,
I'm just finding out about this, and that's beautiful, and that's it, dude. And I think that if we just stay honest, and our whole goal is to put out good products. Plus, you and I have a unique thing that when you get into this business, and we don't just want to do the education, we actually want to do like events where we can hang out with folks like after. So like we have a whole lot of plans of, I've always done like hey, anybody want to go get a drink at a brewery? Is there a brewery? We can get like a quick mini lecture on blank or question and answer, whatever you guys want from class. And those always work because then it's relax. You got a beer. You got to be real careful with that, of course. But being able to just relax and hang out and discuss things both in a professional but yet way laid back setting, and then you build connections, and then you learn about people. Then you like the next thing you're bringing them onto a podcast, or you're buying their book, or you're sending people to their class, because I think we all work better if we play well in the sandbox. John Nash from the movie in real life, but also the movie Beautiful Mind, his whole governing
West
dynamics.
Virginian, by the way,
there you
that's
go.
My genetics.
There
that's
you
my
go.
Genetics.
Love it. His whole dissertation was on, if we do what's best for the group, we all do better. And it's just amazing. And that's, I think
they've been saying that since you were a kid, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Although 80% of people don't know that a gander is a group of geese. A group of crows is called a murder. Did you know that?
I did read that. Now, I couldn't have told you that, but at one point I used to try to memorize random lists. Like I can say all the linking verbs. is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been, has, have, had, do, does, did, shall, will, should, would, may, might, must, and can. So there was at one point I was trying to memorize like 30 or 40 like of the different animals, and I do remember murder was one of them. The flamingos
Yeah.
have an interesting one too.
Yeah, that's right. I'll have to look that up. But I have an infatuation with language, right? Or languages, but you can't study another language without studying your own, and concepts like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and things like that.
Right.
I think that makes me a better educator because I spend so much time working on not just my communication and how I want to say it, but how it is received. And especially when you're, what do you call it? Your marketable skill is, hey, I can help you understand something that as of yet you've not been able to understand. That's my superpower. If I was a superhero, I would be the explainer. Which honestly, that's my favorite superpower. So I love it. I'm not mad about it. And that's not an arrogant statement by any means. I hope nobody misinterprets that. It just makes me really happy that I can do this. And I want to leverage it to the max capacity that I can, because I can only do so much with two hands. I have two hands, right? And in 9 countries, over tens of thousands of patients, I've done some great work. But if you'll take a step back and say, all right, how many guys have you trained? Like Major Payne says, under this hat, I've trained so many combat killing machines or whatever.
Right.
I've trained a ton of paramedics. You know what? I even made a few doctors, which is awesome. I have guys practicing medicine, and I've told them I would work for you any day because I knew your ideals as a freshman biochemistry major. And I want to do that because sooner or later, I'm almost 40, I'm going to have to pass this torch.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do, I want it to be to people that had the same fervor that I have, and that I gave them every lesson, everything I could possibly give them, because I always tell them, I've brought you to my level. When I would clear a medic, I would say, I brought you to my level. There is nothing else I can teach you. Your responsibility is now to get better than me. But you have to lay a good foundation for that. And that's why I'm an educator. I don't want, I want the students to surpass the teachers. I love it when somebody I trained makes me feel like an imbecile. That makes me happy. I did my job. All right. Nobody gets mad when you build a house. Nobody gets mad at the guy who laid the foundation, or excuse me, the guy who laid the foundation doesn't get mad when the other guy starts putting shingles on it when it's fully built. No, this was always the plan. And I think that's where EM Unplugged is just going to be awesome, because we're not just going to lay foundations. We're going to put shingles on it too. We're going to do everything, because if people want to know it, we're going to attack it. It's born and bred out of that. Our content comes from that. The content that I make, that you make, it comes from what people ask. What other company do you know that exists just to answer your questions?
We're definitely approaching it from that different angle where
I love it.
We're answering comments. Like a lot of our content is going to be, especially early. I mean, who knows what the future is going to hold, but I'm pretty sure it's always going to be interacting with our consumers and our clinician buddies and friends and partners and followers. Yep. And that's really that's why that third facet of our ecosystem is a subscription-based support model, where you could do $5 and you're just supporting us a little bit. I think it's called the unconditional support level. You get a little bit, you get exclusive content for that little app that's just interacting with us. $25, you get all of our online content. So if you're looking to use it for IBSC, the FPC, CCPC, or National Registry, or certain nurse certifications or renewals, then you get all of our content. So it's covered. And then the $100 level, which I doubt people are going to keep for weeks or months and months. But yeah, if you need help with passing something or getting hired, or if you just want to be mentored for a little bit, there's those 3 levels. And I think that's where we're going to be able to connect, not only on a week-to-week basis and sometimes day-to-day, because the $100 level, you'll get phone calls from us. We have only a certain amount, a very minimum amount of spots for that at any one time. But the idea is we want to connect with folks. And to do that, of course, we have to be able to go back to our wives and say, all right, I worked 8 hours today on this. Now I need did you do it for free? No, ma'am. But again, we're not trying to charge ridiculous amounts for everything. And in the end, it's about getting good products that are not just the same old stuff, and then being able to connect with our patients. And I think that trifecta has become our ecosystem, and it has happened organically with you and I having conversations and what we want and how we should approach it. And I hope that we always have that connection with our followers and supporters and subscribers. And in the end, that's what's going to drive that's when I had to fill out the application for one of the accreditation bodies recently. It says, okay, how do you know that this is needed? And then there's a couple things like you could do a needs assessment, you could do, and I went and I started plucking out comments that people have already made. And I pulled out like 30 comments and I was like, here's why I said this. And I was like, there's nothing more organic than somebody on their own saying, hey, I want to learn about this. And if we can help them do that, then that is exactly what these accrediting bodies are fighting for, to make sure that we're giving people what they need, this is unbiased. This is raw, and it's pretty awesome, which trivially is going to be when we do this playlist where we actually, you and I just shoot the shit about stuff on our private subscription side. It's going to be called Raw because we're probably going to get raw.
I'm so looking forward to that. But
that's going to be a fun one.
That if you don't mind, let me hijack it for 1 second. And I want to rewind based on what you just said. So the raw stuff. One of my favorite things to do is interact with people. So I love that whenever I go and do a lecture, when somebody says, hey, can we book and get you to come down? I always make sure to let them know that includes beers afterward or coffee or whatever everybody likes, meet and greet, dinner, whatever. Because I like to meet people and talk to people. And I like people when they're in that relaxed environment and where they let their hair down and they ask questions they usually wouldn't or whatever. There's nothing I love more than that, is getting that big hug and people telling me, hey, you helped me. And let me ask you a question about XYZ. And you know what? If you see me out in public, man, come up and shake my hand, give me a hug. I smell terrific. You should know that. I love meeting people. But that's one of the things that excited me about the various plan options, and we'll probably do a deep dive in the origin story for the people that subscribed, where I'll give them the whole history. We don't have the time and I don't have the emotional strength to go through everything that made me right now. But I was in a bad place a couple of years ago. I had pretty much just given up. I had capitulated to the various physical ailments and things that I have, injuries left from the war and things like that, and was told, this is your life now. And there is a program, you could call it that. It's similar to what we're doing with a former Delta Force soldier called Pat McNamara. Some of the guys who hear this are going to have heard of them. And I joined a group that they had because here's this person that they had been through all these terrible things and they were still out there getting after it. And I thought, damn it, man, if they can do it, I can do it too. The Bannister effect. After somebody ran the 6-minute mile, the first Bannister was the first guy to do it. More people started doing it. And the important part is they said that was humanly impossible to run faster than a 6-minute mile. So I subscribed to their plan. I still do to this day. And one of the huge things about it was I could have a conversation with Pat McNamara. How did you get through this, man? What is this like for you?
Yeah.
Like, tell me more about that, bro. I'm in a rut. Help me out here. And to this day, even I have not spoken to him or utilized that service in over a year. And I still leave that draft on because they ignited this fire inside me to where I got a chance to really reach my true potential. And I can tell you now, I'm hoping that I get a chance to engage with people like that and take them to the best version of themselves, or help them. I'm going to try not to get emotional talking about it. Help them reclaim something that they had lost, whether it's burnout or physical ailments, right? Because most paramedics, we last 10 years on the truck and then our body begins to break down. Whatever it is, if I help them overcome this difficulty, that's what I'm looking forward to. As part of that, I'm looking forward to that interaction. It's not a chore by any means. The only reason, and we talked about this earlier, the only reason that you even have to charge for stuff like this, right, is it has to be self-funding. So the more of my living I can make doing this with you, the more of this I can do. And like I talked about earlier, right, if you offered me $1 bajillion to go to the top of Mount Everest and treat patients, yeah, that's great money and all, but I'm going to treat 3 guys a month and I'm not going to do a lot of good in the world. Right. But here I can, right here, I can train other hands that will train other hands and train other hands. And I know it motivates those guys that by helping me reach my potential, I've become a medical influencer who's doing good in the world and helping people. And who knows, man, maybe we get to do that. Maybe I'm trying to get emotional. Like, I'm getting excited though. Like, maybe we get to inspire the next generation of teachers and influencers and doctors and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, putting good out into the world is not a bad thing, and making your living doing it, there's nothing wrong with that. So it's not a pay to play thing, or it doesn't cheapen it to do that. It's just a way that I can continue to do this and let it grow into more than a hobby. And you and I talked about that. So I don't want people to feel like it's a bad thing, so to speak. We're being very real. We're not being gurus, like getting to the raw part. I don't try to misrepresent myself as somebody who knows everything about everything. I'm very human. I drink beer. Sometimes I use a tobacco product or two. I do love a good cigar. I eat cholesterol. I like red meat. I like those things. I'm just like you in every way. I failed the National Registry the first time I took it. I am not a guru, but I am so hard headed that I'll just be damned if I let it defeat me.
There you go, dude.
I will headbutt that concrete until it gives way. And
That's
if
right.
I can get other people to do, that's how you hit these high levels. And the chance to interact with them personally, one-on-one, that gives you a chance to light that fire inside them that you just can't do through other content. So that personal interaction, that these plans where we can talk to them and they can talk to us, that is going to be pure freaking magic. That's not just a product that is getting marketed. That is going to be awesome. And I can tell you that now because I do get on the Zoom meetings every other Sunday. A lot of times I do more listening than talking with the Pat Mack and those guys I was telling you about, Pat and CJ. And I still draw inspiration from that to this day. So it's a big deal. Yes, it's very powerful. So I don't want people to hear this and think it's a quote unquote commercial. Yes, we're telling them about the service that we're offering, but it's not. I'm not trying to tell you 3 easy payments of $19.99 and I'll sell you this vegetable chopper. That is not what we're doing here. Yes, that is not what we're doing here. I want to forge a relationship. I want to know your name. I want to know your kids. I want to meet these people that are trying to give everything they've got to this noble cause. Yep. Right. So that's a big deal.
Yep. And that is a perfect way to culminate everything, because our conversations have always been like, this is what we want. When you try to, you mentioned earlier about trying to start a company, when you sit down, like, you can't just create the company that's already out there, because chances are the other company's, it's been around, it's doing it, unless you have to do something better. So that was really basically the 3 things we wanted. We wanted to be real. We wanted to be, our content to be unique and meaningful. And then we wanted to connect with folks. And so that's our whole goal. And you just framed it perfectly.
Well, that was the origin of the love of the game thing. When we had the first time we sat down and had steaks and whiskey and we talked about it, we said, how cool would it be if you would do everything everybody else isn't doing? And the reason they're not doing it is because it's hard and it's not cost effective and it doesn't make maximum profit. It doesn't do any of those things. It's a terrible business model.
Right.
But if you're in it for the love of the game, you're going to work on this stuff one way or the other. There's so many hours a week I'm going to put into emergency medicine and education of emergency medicine. That's going to happen. Now, if you look at it from that angle, if you start a company that tackles these issues that nobody wants to do because they don't yield maximum profit, they do yield maximum benefit, just not for us. But they will allow you to make a living, to live an incredibly fulfilling life, which I feel like street medics and chopper medics and even medic students, they identify with that because they could obviously make way more money doing something else.
And
so
ER nursing and ICU nursing and all everybody in the field. Yep.
Yeah, they get it, right? They get that, quote unquote, we don't do it for the money. We want the bills paid. I do, you do. Everybody wants the bills paid. But we don't do it because I have no need of a Ferrari in the driveway. You know what I mean? If I hit the Powerball, I'm buying a 72 Chevelle. I'll tell you that right now. I am a simple person. Yeah, man, that's all I want. I don't want anything fancy. I don't want anything big. But I don't want to build a life I need a vacation from. And I think that everybody who works in the medical field, they understand that concept. They are not willing to completely and utterly hate their job in exchange for how they eat, right? And I think this company was built with that. I am not willing to completely and utterly hate my job so that I can stare at a Corvette in the driveway, man. Screw that Corvette. I don't need one. I don't want one. But what I would love to do is say, you know what? Me and Charlie are going to Atlanta next week. We're going to meet 300-400 people and sit down and talk. I'm going to hear their life stories. They're going to tell me about them and I'm going to tell them about me. And this is going to be fucking great. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yep. That is what I'm interested in. And honestly, if you could sum up the origin story and the mission of EM Unplugged, I think that really does it. I really do.
Yep. I love it. And that's probably the only thing we haven't talked about is that I'm excited about that. I don't know that we've developed this very well yet, but we've talked about it. So let's just be real. The pop-ups where if there's a conference and we just say, hey, we're at blank conference. We're going to be at this bar. We have a little space. Come join and have some little swag to give away or whatever. I'm excited about all that because, again, that just connects people. I think I'm so fired up about this and glad we got this first episode logged and so people know a little bit about it. And do you have any last closing words, Sir Shade Tree?
Yeah, just to let people know, look for us to, I think I called it crashing conferences. Look for us to crash conferences, because I have no issue speaking at a conference if I was asked to talk about empathy and the things that we struggle with. But I have no desire or career goal to see my name on a roster or a program. I am 10 times more interested in telling everybody, hey, there's a pub down from the conference hall and Charlie and I are going to be there, and I would love to shake every hand that wants to shake mine. That would be the big thing. And the reason I would say that as the closing words is I want to interact with everybody who hears this that I physically can, because I know I fire guys up. I know I motivate guys, but you have to understand that the fuel for that is you motivate me. So if you want to be a part of this, is not a company per se. This is not a simple CEU thing. This is a movement. This is a mission. If you want to be a part of this, it doesn't even cost you any money. Just come be a part of this, man. Because I'm telling you, this will do more to improve medicine than most of the studies that get written. I promise you. It's a mindset.
That's awesome, brother. Let's close with that. Thank you guys for joining us. Greg, appreciate your time. And as our new sign off is hopefully the motto that we end up adopting, but here's my proposition to Greg. Unplug, get better, save lives.
Hell yeah. I like it. Get better, save lives.
We'll see you next time, guys. Thanks.
Later, guys.